On the night of July 17th, 1918, somewhere in the Ural forest, a woman was pushed alive into a mine shaft 60 meters deep. She was 53 years old. She had survived a revolution, a world war, and the bomb that killed her husband in front of her eyes. She had been offered an escape route, a train, money, a safe passage out of Russia, and she had turned it down. She was not a soldier. She was not a political figure. She was a princess. And according to the peasant who witnessed it from the tree line, as she fell, she said, "Lord, forgive them. They do not know what they do." After all the victims had been thrown in, the executioners tossed grenades down the shaft. Silence did not come. They piled brushwood over the opening and set it on fire. Through the smoke, from 60 meters underground, witnesses heard singing, a liturgical chant, rising out of the earth. That is where this story ends. But to understand why it ended that way, we have to go back 60 years, to a small palace in Germany, to a little girl named Ella. Elizabeth Alexandra Louise Alice was born on November 1st, 1864, in the Grand Duchy of Hesse-Darmstadt. Her father was Grand Duke Ludwig IV. Her mother was Princess Alice, a daughter of Queen Victoria herself. On paper, this was a life of gilded privilege. In practice, Ella's childhood was shaped by something far less common in royal households of the era, a mother who genuinely believed that other people's suffering was her personal business. Princess Alice personally walked hospital wards. Every Saturday, she took her daughters to the hospital in Darmstadt, not for a ceremonial visit, but to actually sit with patients, talk to them, and bring them flowers. These were daughters of a ruling house. They could have spent their Saturdays learning embroidery. Instead, they were learning that pain does not belong only to the poor. Ella was the second of 7 children, and by all accounts, the peacemaker, the one who instinctively stepped between arguing siblings and somehow dissolved the conflict. She loved flowers, classical music, painting. She had a deep contralto voice. But what people remembered most about young Ella was not her beauty, which was considered remarkable. It was the quality of her attention, the way she made people feel genuinely seen. Then, the grief arrived, and it did not stop. Her 3-year-old brother, Friedrich, fell from a window in front of their mother. Then, diphtheria swept through the household. Little sister Maria died at 4 years old. And in 1878, Princess Alice herself died of the same disease at 35, after nursing her children through their illness and contracting it herself. Ella was 14. She wrote her grandmother, Queen Victoria, a letter, not about her own grief, but to comfort the old woman on the loss of her daughter. She wrote about what she imagined the afterlife might be like, about how her mother was probably, finally, at peace. 14 years old, and already the instinct was to turn outward. By the early 1880s, Ella had become one of the most admired young women in Europe. The future Kaiser Wilhelm II pursued her with characteristic aggression and persistence. She declined. She found him coarse and self-absorbed, and the historical record suggests she was correct on both counts. Her interest lay elsewhere, with Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich, the 5th son of Russian Emperor Alexander II. They had known each other since childhood, their mothers being fellow Hessian princesses. Queen Victoria opposed the match. Russia was dangerous. The Tsar had just been assassinated by revolutionaries, but Ella was decided, and she wrote to her grandmother that everyone who knew Sergei described him as a man of truthful and noble character. They married on June 3, 1884 in St. Petersburg, in a ceremony that was spectacular, even by Russian Imperial standards. Ella arrived in Russia as a Lutheran. Nobody required her to convert, not the law, not Sergei, who wanted it desperately, but never pushed. For 7 years, she watched. She attended Orthodox services, studied the theology, and observed how the Russian people lived inside their faith. Something moved in her that she could not reason away. 7 years after arriving in Russia, Ella wrote her father a letter explaining that she intended to convert to Orthodoxy. It is one of the most remarkable documents in the history of royal religious conversion because it contains no diplomatic language, no political calculation, and no deference to anyone's expectations. It would be a lie to remain as I was. I go to this step on deep conviction. On April 13th, 1891, Palm Saturday, Yelizaveta Feodorovna was received into the Orthodox Church. Sergei stood beside her, barely holding back tears. She kept the name Elizabeth, but chose a new patron saint, the righteous Yelizaveta Feodorovna, mother of John the Baptist, a woman celebrated in the Gospels for rejoicing in someone else's miracle as if it were her own. On that day, she received a small icon of Christ with a date engraved on the back. She carried it for 27 years. It was found on her body at the bottom of the mine shaft. In 1891, Sergei was appointed Governor General of Moscow. Ella became, by default, the First Lady of Russia's second most important city. The role came with grand receptions and official appearances, none of which interested her particularly. What interested her was what she could see outside the palace windows. Hundreds of churches with the destitute sleeping on their steps, chronically understaffed hospitals for the poor, orphanages, prisons, and Hitrovka, the city's notorious slum district, where Moscow sent the people it preferred not to think about. She started going there without announcements. She brought food and clothing, visited prisoners, and walked through Hitrovka at night when the police advised her it was not safe to do so. Almost no one knew. She kept the personal work hidden deliberately. The publicly visible charity was fine, but what happened on Hitrovka at midnight was between her and the people she was with. She told her brother Ernst that her ideal was to be a perfect woman, and that this was the most difficult because it required learning to forgive everything. The word was not rhetorical. She meant it precisely. She and Sergei had no biological children. When Sergei's brother, Grand Duke Pavel, lost his wife in childbirth, they took in her 2 orphaned children, 8-year-old Dmitri and 6-year-old Maria, and raised them as their own. Russia in 1905 was fracturing. The Russo-Japanese War had ended in humiliation. Bloody Sunday had just occurred. Revolutionary cells were active across the country, and Grand Duke Sergei's name was on a target list. He had already begun traveling without his adjutant, unwilling to risk another person's life. On February 18th, just after noon, his carriage left the Nicholas Palace for a meeting at the governor's office. Ella was in her studio, working on embroidery for a charity sale. Then, the explosion. The detonation was powerful enough to shake windows hundreds of meters away and sway the chandeliers in the palace. Servants froze in the corridors. Elizabeth understood immediately. She ran down the stairs without a hat or coat. Someone threw a cloak over her shoulders at the door and redirected her sleigh towards the source of the sound. What she found at the explosion site is genuinely difficult to put in words. The force of the bomb had scattered the remains of her husband across a wide area of snow-covered ground. Only his face had been spared intact. Two women from the crowd rushed toward her to block her view and keep her back. She moved past them as if they were not there. She knelt in the snow and, with her hands, began collecting what remained of her husband and placing it on a stretcher brought by soldiers nearby. Quietly, without screaming, without tears. She found the small icons he had always worn on a chain around his neck, scattered in the debris, and held them in her fist. She later told her sister, Victoria, that throughout, she had only one thought, that she needed to move quickly because Sergei always hated disorder and blood. When it was done, she walked on foot behind the stretcher to the nearby Chudov monastery. Inside, she knelt at the coffin and did not move for the entire service. Her blue dress was covered in dried blood. Her face was the color of paper. Her adopted children, Dmitri and Maria, were waiting when she came out. She pulled them close and kept repeating that their father had loved them so much. 3 days after her husband's murder, Yelizaveta Feodorovna asked to be taken to the prison where Ivan Kalayev, the man who had thrown the bomb, was being held. No one around her understood why. Many tried to dissuade her. She offered no explanation. She went. She spent nearly 2 hours in Kalayev's cell. She told him she had come to bring forgiveness on behalf of Sergei. She asked him to repent. She left him a gospel and a small icon. Then she wrote a letter to the emperor requesting that Kalayev's life be spared. Kalayev refused to repent. The petition was denied. He was executed months later. But one detail stayed with her. A prison guard reported that after she left, Kalayev had placed her icon on the pillow beside his head. That was enough for her. That single small gesture, an icon on a pillow, and she allowed herself the first faint smile anyone had seen on her face since the explosion. Grand Duke Alexander Mikhailovich, a cousin of Sergei, wrote about the visit years later. Not a pose, not a performance. Genuine mercy drove her to visit her husband's killer in his cell. After her husband's death, the expected path was clear. Mourning, gradual return to society, the quiet dignity of a widowed Grand Duchess. Elizabeth chose a different one. She sold her jewelry and distributed her wardrobes, keeping only what Sergei had personally given her. With the proceeds, she built something. In 1909, in the Zamoskvoreche district of Moscow, the Martha and Mary Convent of Mercy opened. It was not a conventional monastery. The sisters took vows, but not permanent ones. They lived in the world and worked directly with the poor, the sick, and the imprisoned. Hospital, free clinic and pharmacy, orphanage for girls, halfway house for women leaving prison, Sunday school, library. Elizabeth herself slept only a few hours a night. She walked the wards after midnight, changed bandages, and sat with the dying. On weekends, she returned to Hitrovka and talked to people that the rest of Moscow avoided. By any objective measure, she was one of the most respected women in Russia. She was also spending her nights in a slum, talking to people no one else would approach. Her lady-in-waiting, Nana Graydon, wrote years later that around Elizabeth there was always an atmosphere of calm. Not passive calm, but the calm of well-organized work and genuine sympathy. She added that Elizabeth radiated peace and love and had such a good sense of humor that ordinary people loved her for it. Simple Muscovites, the destitute, the widows, the former prisoners she had helped were already calling her a saint, while she was still alive. When World War I broke out in 1914, Elizabeth's position became acutely complicated. Russia was at war with Germany. She was a German princess. Denunciations arrived almost immediately. By 1915, anti-German sentiment in Moscow had turned violent. Shops with German names were looted, and her brother Ernst was caught in the upheaval. The convent kept working. February 1917, the Tsar abdicated. The convent kept working. October 1917, the Bolsheviks seized power. The convent kept working. The offer that could have saved her life came through a Swedish minister, a way out of Russia, arranged and ready. Her sister Victoria pleaded with her to go. Ella declined. She said she knew the Russian people too well to be afraid of them. In April 1918, during Holy Week, with Easter services underway, 2 Cheka officers arrived at the gate. They had come for the Mother Superior. She said goodbye to each sister individually, blessed them, and walked out. She was taken to Alapayevsk, a small Ural town, where she was held alongside several other members of the Romanov family. For a few weeks, conditions were almost manageable. They could attend church, work in the garden, read. Then, on the night of July 17, 1918, the night after the Tsar and his family were shot in Yekaterinburg, the guards woke the prisoners and loaded them onto carts. They drove 18 kilometers into the forest. At the abandoned Nizhnya Selimskaya 9, the executioners pushed their victims into a 60-meter shaft, alive. Elizabeth was first. The peasant witness, hiding among the trees, later reported that he heard her speak as she fell, the words of forgiveness from the Gospel of Luke, the same words spoken at the crucifixion. After everyone had been thrown in, grenades were tossed down the shaft. When silence still did not follow, the executioners piled brushwood over the opening and set it ablaze. Through the smoke, the witness said, he could still hear singing, a liturgical chant, rising from 60 meters underground. The executioners left. When White Army forces recovered the bodies months later, the medical examination revealed what had happened. Elizabeth had not fallen to the bottom. She had landed on a ledge 15 meters down. Beside her was Prince Ion Konstantinovich, his head bandaged with cloth torn from her veil. In total darkness, with severe injuries from the fall, she had found him and dressed his wounds. The icon of Christ, given to her on the day she was received into Orthodoxy, was on her chest. The fingers of her right hand were positioned in the Orthodox sign of the cross. Her body traveled from Siberia through China and Egypt to Jerusalem, where she was buried in the Church of Mary Magdalene and Gethsemane, a church she had visited on pilgrimage years before, where she had mentioned, almost in passing, that she would like to be buried someday. In 1981, The Russian Orthodox Church abroad canonized her as a saint. In 1992, the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia did the same. Her relics remain in that church today, above the Gethsemane Garden. Grand Duke Alexander Mikhailovich wrote that she left the imprint of her image on the blood-stained pages of Russian history. Nana Graydon, who had known emperors and prime ministers, wrote simply at the end of her memoirs, "Rarely has human nature come so close to perfection." A German princess who became more Russian than most Russians. A Grand Duchess who chose a slum hospital over a palace. A widow who offered forgiveness to her husband's killer. A woman who, in the darkness of a mine shaft with broken bones, found someone in worse condition and tended to his wounds. Her name was Ella, and every step of this, she chose herself. Thank you for watching. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and leave a like. It helps this channel reach more people. I want to leave you with one question. We talk about courage as fighting back, resisting, surviving. But what do you call a person whose form of courage was to stay, to forgive, and to sing in the dark? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every one. See you in the next video.